Good morning, guys. Well, it's morning here. I don't know when you're watching this, but I just finished breakfast and I figured this would be the perfect time to film this video for what you guys have been asking me to do, which is go over the 4 different types of hunger. Yes, there are 4. We have biological hunger, taste hunger, practical hunger, and emotional hunger. So we're going to sit down right now and just kind of go through what those 4 different types are, as well as how to go about getting hunger cues back and strengthening them. I'm also going to give you super actionable tips for how to actually honor your hunger and do it in a way that makes you feel good mentally and physically. And as always, guys, this video is for entertainment purposes only. It's not meant to be specific nutrition or medical advice. If you do need this, be sure to reach out to a healthcare provider immediately. Okay, so I really feel like I need some natural daylight in my life. My office is in my basement, which is so dark, so we're gonna film this in my breakfast nook. Okay, so let's start with biological hunger. So this is the body telling you that you need energy. Now, you can actually lose hunger cues from not listening to them and only be able to identify extremes. What I mean by this is that you could ignore your hunger cues, like when we're on diets or restricting foods, following meal plans, and essentially your body kind of starts to say, okay, well, she's not listening to me, so I'm just not gonna give her any cues. It kind of like shuts down. Now, this can also happen from things like high stress or high emotions, anxiety, sadness, and so on. Those can kind of dull our ability to have those hunger cues. Physical activity can also impact our biological hunger cues. For instance, you might not feel necessarily hungry after workout, but you know that your body needs some energy, and we'll talk about this more in the practical hunger section. So when it comes to this biological hunger, the first thing to do to get your body back to a state where it has hunger cues is get it to actually be nourished and fed. And with this, I recommend giving your body some nourishment, some food every roughly 3 to 5 hours, although it could totally be sooner than that. What this does essentially is it allows, if you don't have those biological hunger cues, to almost wake them up in a sense and kind of start to have a dialogue with your body and have it be like, okay, so she's giving me food now, so I can give her hunger cues and tell her when I'm hungry, tell her when I'm full, and that can kind of guide. But if it doesn't know that you're starting to listen to it and that food's available, it's probably not going to give you those hunger cues. Now, at this time, it's totally normal to crave more food. Essentially, if you have been dieting, you're repaying your body with a little bit of debt added for all of that restricting food, either overall food or specific types of food. Now, this is especially true for carb cravings if you've been restricting carbs. So let's get a little sciencey here for a second. Neuropeptide Y is a brain chemical that triggers the urge to eat carbs. Now, undereating increases NYP. So it's common if you crave carbs right now, if you're coming off of a dieting phase where you're restricting them. Honoring them is important. Now, in this phase of regaining hunger cues, you may also overeat at first, and this is normal. It's your body trying to stock up because it doesn't believe that you're not going to go back to a diet. But the more that you prove that food is available, the more that your body is going to understand that, oh, no more diet is coming. I can give her my hunger and fullness cues. I'll say this a lot, but just stay mindful, stay present when you are feeling that extra hunger and honor it. But again, do it mindfully and stay present. Don't kind of switch off to autopilot and just kind of start zoning out. Now, at first, if you don't have those hunger cues, it can just be thinking about food or hunger that is kind of that cue. This is what we call the extremes of something called the hunger scale. Essentially, the hunger scale is a tool that I use in the society to help teach members how to understand their hunger and fullness levels. But this could also be stomach pain, tummy grumbles, headache, fatigue, etc. Those are all hunger cues, and it differs from person to person. Over time, you start to notice more moderate cues, and they will tell you it's time for a snack. But again, it's totally normal, like I said, not to have those more moderate cues at first. So I like to use the analogy of an archer. So at first, you've never been an archer before, right? So I'm talking like bow and arrow here. So at first, you're probably not going to hit the bullseye, right? But over time, the more that you practice, the closer that you're going to get to that bullseye. That's kind of the same thing that I talk about with learning to interpret your hunger and fullness cues and get those hunger and fullness cues back. You start at the extremes of the hunger scale, kind of just feeling hangry, and then you're able to interpret some of those more moderate hunger cues. Okay, so I had to move because the light change was insane and it was driving me nuts. But now let's talk about taste hunger. So this is the second type of hunger. Taste hunger is essentially when you are craving something, it just sounds delicious. You're not necessarily biologically hungry. Now, this is totally normal, and here's a real life example. Last weekend, my mother-in-law had just made cookies and she offered me and my husband one, and I wasn't actually biologically hungry, but the cookie looked delish. So I had it because I wanted it. Now, when you eat intuitively, this is not a big deal. There's no rule breaking, so you just eat a comfortable amount and you don't think, oh, well, I blew it, so I might as well just throw in the towel and eat them all. You're able to identify, okay, that cookie satisfied my craving and I'm moving on now. At first, this doesn't happen because, again, you don't have that trust with yourself that you can have it whenever you want again. Denying your cravings is likely going to lead to overeating them later. It's super important to actually honor them. Studies have shown that deprivation actually leads to those feelings, those addictive feelings or obsession. The key here is to, again, do so mindfully and not to check out, which a lot of times we feel like taste hunger is for those foods that are deemed bad, like a cookie. So we feel guilty, and no one wants to feel that way, nor do we want people to judge us for eating it. We don't think about it and we don't savor it. We just kind of shovel it in as fast as we can. Can you relate? I have an entire video on different mindful eating exercises that I can link for you that's very helpful. I think I need to do a video on the whole idea of sugar addiction or food addiction. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. All right, practical hunger. So this is when you have the ability and the time to eat, but you might not necessarily be biologically hungry. You might not have any taste hunger. Let's be honest, okay? We can't always just eat on a whim and follow our hunger cues. I mean, we have jobs, we have schedules, we have dinner reservations. Here's an example of how to implement practical hunger. Say you usually get hungry for lunch around, like, say noon, but maybe you have a meeting from 11:30 to 1:30. What I always say is to look forward to the next time that you'd be able to eat and ask yourself, would I be hangry by then? We know that when we get overly hungry, we tend to be less likely to listen to our fullness and satisfaction cues, leading us to likely overeat and do so in a binge-like style. So if the answer is, yeah, I'm probably gonna be really hungry when I get done with my meeting at 1:30, then it might be a good idea to eat lunch around 11 when you're not necessarily super hungry, because you're just being practical. Does that make sense? Now, we chatted earlier about working out and how it can kind of dull some of our biological hunger cues. Now, this is different for everyone, but maybe you're not feeling super hungry after a tough workout. You lifted some heavy things and your muscles are feeling it, right? Now, you don't need to force yourself to eat a giant, thick protein shake right away necessarily, but what you might do is to have a snack with some protein in there when you get home as a way to replenish your muscles. Does that make sense? All right, guys, the fourth type of hunger, emotional hunger. Now, this is when you're just mostly trying to get a pick-me-up from food, using it as a little bit of a mood boost. I have an entire video on emotional eating, so I'm not gonna get too into the weeds here. It's a big topic, but basically here's what you need to know. Emotional eating is a spectrum, okay? On one end, we have eating a brownie to give you a boost while you're still listening to your comfortable fullness level, okay? This is totally normal and fine. You don't necessarily expect that brownie to fix your bad day. Now, on the other side, you're eating the entire pan of brownies to avoid feelings of boredom, stress, sadness, anxiety, etc. You're trying to use it to fix your bad day. Now, if you don't have strong biological hunger cues, that first type of hunger, and you aren't honoring that, then emotional eating can seem very prominent because you're finding a reason to eat. If you strengthen your biological hunger cues, you can more easily identify emotional eating here, okay? The key here, like I've said before, is to really stay present, own your choice to have that brownie for a pick-me-up, and be mindful. Enjoy it. Don't switch to autopilot mode and don't necessarily expect it to fix your bad day. So now let's go into a few practical quick tips on how to go about honoring your hunger. Tip number 1 is that getting hunger cues back takes giving your body consistent, adequate energy, using that practical hunger at first to offer your body food every 3 to 5 hours. Tip number 2, you're going to likely feel like you're eating a lot at first because, again, you're paying your body back with some debt. Tip 3, stay present during the process. A lot of people worry that they're just gonna binge eat. Use some mindful eating exercises. One of my favorite things, super easy guys, is just to ask yourself, am I still tasting this food? Am I still enjoying it? Instant mindfulness. Tip number 4, above all guys, remember that everything's a learning experience. Nothing is bad. If you catch yourself emotional eating, trying to fix your bad day, identify how you could cope with those emotions next time. Did your taste hunger turn into a binge? Did you end up feeling stuffed? Or did you start eating overly hungry? Pick a mindful eating exercise to use next time. Maybe plan some of those foods in more often if you're noticing that gotta get it now or never aspect. Something we talk about in the society a lot is actually planning in those foods that you tend to binge on to kind of normalize them. All right, guys, I hope you liked this video and I hope it was helpful giving you guys an overview of the different types of hunger, because there is 4 different types of hunger and it's so important to honor our hunger, all 4 of them. If you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe to the channel down there, and hit the little bell to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. And I will see you guys next week with another video. See you later.